You want the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth about sports in the state of Michigan?
You can't handle the truth!
Well, we're giving you the Michigan Sports Truth, the show that provides research and statistics about all the Detroit and Michigan sports teams, whether fans like it or not, and detects, exposes, and reveals actual and hidden facts and truth that the mainstream media doesn't want you to know. No junk, no entertainment, no homerism, no coddling, no pop culture, no opinions, no shilling, and no fluff. Head over to our website at michigansportstruth.weebly.com, follow us on Twitter at Michigan_truth, and like and share our verified Facebook page, the Michigan Sports Truth Podcast. Also listen to us on Spreaker, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts via iTunes, and Spotify. The Michigan Sports Truth Podcast does not represent or defame any of the teams it covers. It only detects, exposes, and reveals honest, actual, and hidden truth, facts, and statistics about them.
And welcome to episode 326 of the audio podcast, which is still a weekly edition, but we're just going to call it the audio podcast from here forward. I'm Taylor Phillips, along with Buck Geno and Ed Smith. You can follow me on Twitter at DT2Phillips. Follow Ed Smith on Twitter at EdSmith313, and follow Buck Geno on Twitter at BuckGeno III, 3 I's for Roman numerals. So are you guys there?
I am.
Yeah.
Sounds like maybe had dropped off there, but we'll get him back shortly. We're ready to go.
Yep. Still trying to get him here, but you can also follow our Periscope channel at Michigan_truth. You can follow my personal Instagram at DT2Phillips. It's got IGTV with the Michigan Sports Truth video pregame and postgame podcasts. Come on, Ed, pick up. Still waiting on Ed.
Yeah, well, we can go ahead and...
Oh, come on, we can't do that. But let's kick this off with we got 3 teams to talk about, 2 topics in the first team we're going to talk about, and that is the Detroit Lions.
Touchdown, Detroit Lions!
Camp has started.
Yeah. Jeff Moss recently wrote an article headlining "What Happened in That Locker Room." And it was actually a follow-up article regarding the Matt Patricia sexual assault case in 1996. There's a lot of information here, including the fans using the excuses of the charges being dropped by the accuser in 1997, and the case not making it to trial just to defend him and keep drinking the Kool-Aid when he obviously should have been proven guilty. And there's roughly 63% of cases where women either never file a complaint with the police or refuse to cooperate with an investigation. So, Buck, we'll start with you while we wait for Ed.
Well, I mean, it boils down to this. The court of law has passed the judgment on Matt Patricia, and whether or not that satisfies people, it doesn't sound like it's very satisfying yet, because obviously the way it played out, where the accuser refused to testify, and in 1996, the attitudes towards those types of cases was much different than it is today. And we've said it many times on the show, the court of law, even though they've proven Matt Patricia innocent by omission of any credible witnesses coming forward, it doesn't mean that something. But for us to say that,
we just got that.
My phone.
Yep, Buck's talking. Oh, Ed left again.
Can you hear me?
Yep. Ed, can you hear me?
Yeah, I do apologize for that, gentlemen. There was a slight technical issue regarding my phone. I had to restart it due to problems with the app, but I should be able to hear you guys clearly better now.
Yeah, it came at the wrong time. But anyway, Buck, continue.
Yeah, so I mean, what it boils down to is, was he guilty? We'll never know because the trial never happened. There was enough evidence to indict, but when you don't have somebody come forward and give the opposite side of the story, it's really hard to get a conviction, obviously. So the main drive of Moss's article, and it really kind of the prevailing attitude of a lot of people that aren't around the team on a daily basis is, what happened? With all the things that swirl around the NFL regarding sexual assault, domestic abuse, and other related issues, and the Me Too movement, which has engulfed the sports and entertainment world, and obviously just the public persona, you have to ask the question, what indeed happened? And Matt Patricia, I don't want to say hiding behind, but just kind of leaving too much to the imagination with his cover-all statement that he went to court, he didn't get charged, he was charged with crimes but was not convicted. That should be enough. Well, there's a lot of guys that do bad things that don't get convicted because the accuser chooses not to come forward, or they're pressured into not testifying because of certain things. And in 1996, that attitude was far more pervasive to sexual assault victims than it is today. And who's to say what that witness went through? Were they coerced by the defense? Were they scared of having public backlash because of what was happening? Matt Patricia is not the guy who he is today. He was a college football player at the time. And, if I go back 22 years, the only people that really know what happened are the three people that were involved. Matt Patricia, the teammate, and the woman that accused them of the crime. And if you're missing the vital piece of that puzzle, which is the person that was accusing them of that crime, it's hard to pin anything on Matt Patricia, but only he knows. And if he feels that he was 100% in the right, that there was nothing wrong, he can come out and say so. But he hasn't said that. He's just basically said that the criminal justice system went through its paces and he wasn't found guilty. So that's not really a denial of guilt. That's simply saying that he went through the process. And I don't want to parse his words too much, but what Moss is driving at is that we as fans would deserve to know what happened, because the NFL is severely cracking down on this kind of stuff when in a time that our society is really looking down on this. Not that really people look up to it, but it's more of the bringing it to the forefront and making it an issue. It's imperative that we know what happened, because if he did something wrong, he needs to pay the piper. And I get where he's driving at. The problem is that he wants these beat writers to ask this question until he answers it. Well, if I'm a beat writer for one of the newspapers or online newspapers, and I keep asking that question that keeps being dismissed, and I keep harassing him, number one, I'm probably going to get pulled off the beat. Number two, I'm probably not going to have a job for very long, because I want to keep asking this question. And I understand why he wants to know this. I understand why a lot of people want to know what happened. But at the same time, you're not going to tell me that Dave Burkett or Kyle Meinke or Justin Rogers or any of the guys that follow the Lions on a day-to-day basis are going to keep asking that question, because they're going to keep getting the same answer. You can't get an injury report from these guys. You think Matt Patricia is going to come clean on a podium in a press conference one day? It's not going to happen. So I get where he's coming from. I understand why he wants to know that, and it's a valid argument. The problem is that it's just not going to be answered in that forum, and I don't know if it will ever be answered. But the fact remains that there's something that's missing, and that's the account from Matt Patricia today, rather than the 21-year-old that was charged with a crime and was going to be brought to trial. And so he's the only one in the public eye right now that can either clear the air or admit wrongdoing. He's really doing neither at this point. He's just simply saying the stock line that he's been coached to say, or that he's been learned to say over the years, that the court system did its job and nothing happened. And it's frustrating. It's not what we're looking for, but I fear that that's probably all we're going to get. And while Moss's article brings up a lot of good points, and this point has been made by more than Jeff Goss. I mean, this was one of the first hit. There was a lot of people that wanted this answer. But the news cycle today is much less, has a lot more turnover, is much less lengthy than it was in 1996. And, people have moved on. And I'm not saying that we should move on from the topic, but it's not going to come from a beat writer just perpetually badgering him down and trying to see if he'll answer the question. It's probably going to come, if ever, when he's far away from the game of football, or conversely, if somebody comes forward, and that would be the accuser. And they have not done so to this point. The stats that he quoted in his article, I don't know exactly where they came from, but you're not talking about a huge amount of people that are making these things up. It doesn't happen very often. It does, and that's typically when it's sensationalized by the media, because when somebody makes these claims up and tries to ruin somebody's career or life or both, that's something that is brought to the fore, but it does not happen very often. And for somebody to accuse somebody of that, something happened. Whether we ever find out what happened is really up to Matt Patricia and the other two parties that were a part of that case.
Ed, your say.
First and foremost, great to be on. Buck, that was a tremendous opening salvo from you as well. Very fine points, very fine arguments that I can't really, in a sense, I don't want to piggyback off of too much, but, from a sense of where Patricia stands, where he's at, he is being too vague. I get that. It's the culture of where he was when he was even back in New England. Of course, with Bob Quinn, it's a familiar issue of what he's doing now. And like what Buck said, if you think injury reports were something that would be a treasure cove, you think he's going to all of a sudden spill his guts on a random press conference or any day or post game or a Wednesday about this, any other random issue, especially this particular issue? No. And in any type of way or method that was going to happen, if we're in some type of controlled setup situation where Patricia was giving an open interview, like say a sit down exclusive with Dan Miller or something to that effect, or call into 97.1 to give a thorough, detailed explanation as legally permitted about his side of what happened that night. As for Moss's article, I understand why he did it from a moral sense, and I sympathize and, greatly from what he's trying to do here in terms of bringing attention to the issue. Because of what society that we are in right now, we have a very, very, very short attention span, where we can look at something and literally pass it off to the next thing in about 5 minutes or even 5 seconds. So, in a sense, I get it that he doesn't want this to be, subconsciously swept under the rug. I understand. However, there is also a thing called due process, and that can and should and must be applied in many and all different ways, areas, and forms. Whether you may agree with it, if it agrees from your point of view, or dislike it because it doesn't agree with your point of view, depending on the situation. if you look at my personal feed and whatnot, whether it be on social media, you understand where my views are in terms of political and geological sense. As progressive I may come across as, I am still a firm believer of having due process involved for any and all sorts of situations, whether it be to prove one's guilt or one's innocence. Like Buck said, we don't know. None of us know for certain what in the heck happened that night. Whether the only two people that know is what this alleged victim and Matt Patricia. That's it. One has their side, the other has their side. We don't have anything else other than that. And it's unfortunate because it would help us form a much better conclusive argument or a standpoint on this particular issue. With the era where we are with Me Too and other things such as that, I think it does get lost in a sense. And I'm not saying all of it because, trust me, there are very sincere and legit stories and moments and people and names of a whole just up and down where, oh my goodness, you understood it was a problem, but you never realized how much of a problem it was until now. But then there's also other minor cases and instances of where something was either blown out of proportion or something wasn't completely and factually proven enough, and thus in turn would be seen as someone trying to potentially ruin someone's reputation. I bring up, for instance, the Chris Hardwick situation. He was suspended, temporarily let go of his positions at AMC and whatnot because of allegations that was brought upon him by a former ex-girlfriend, I believe. Now, apparently, after an apparent AMC investigation, he was found innocent. He's going to return to his jobs. That will lead me to believe that something on the effect of not enough evidence was proven or shown to further, show one's guilt or innocence or to let this case proceed any further. There's just as equally, and I say that to bring this, there's just an equal strong chance that this was what happened here in this situation, just as it is to the equally obvious chance of what victims go through in terms of mentally reliving the horror of what happened to them, and also mentally going through and emotionally, psychologically going through whatever things that might trigger them in terms of just stepping forward, let alone participating in and testifying and whatnot. So I understand why greatly that, and among other factors of the system just not trusting them or not believing in them enough, why many do not go forward or continue with cases. I get that. But in the system that we're in, the country that we're in, I believe, and there should, an all-out advocate for all-out due legal process, period. Whether we may agree or disagree with what's finding, the truth and the facts should always come out, period. And the only way we can ever know that for certain about this Matt Patricia issue is if more facts and more details exactly come out. And knowing where we're currently at right now, it's just hard to foresee what type of way we could, again, form that conclusive argument, knowing what we have now. It's just very difficult to do. So until that momentum changing, shifting occurrence comes about, it's just an issue that's in limbo. The time, essentially, that it was made the rounds, to the time that we're discussing about it right here and now.
Yeah. And there are a couple of questions of that in 5 questions, but very, very good point about the AMC stuff, Ed. Just a lot of facts and truth and details on this Matt Patricia stuff that we just pointed out here in this episode. Speaking of the Lions, defensive end Ziggy Ansah has been put on the PUP list. It was a precautionary thing, considering he has an injury history with the Detroit Lions. And this upcoming year is his franchise tag year. He won't be back because they wouldn't sign him to an extension near the franchise tag deadline. And this may be a sign that the Lions may no longer need Ziggy Ansah. But then again, Ziggy Ansah may still be good despite his injuries. Ed, we'll start with you this time.
Yeah, I will start off by saying that, if anyone has any type of eerie, similar feelings about this whole situation when Ndamukong Suh goes down, there is a certain sense of deja vu of this instance, only with the mere exception being that, of course, Ndamukong Suh at his peak, at his apex, was an all-time, in his prime, future Hall of Fame defensive tackle that warranted the type of discussion and contract, in my opinion, at that time, of what it was going to take to keep him here. As for Ziggy Ansah, as terrific as a great start as he's had to his young career, the fact that remains here is that due to a main constant and prevalent issue that has hindered him reaching his full potential, which is, of course, his injuries and how it's attacking him in different places of his body, whether it be his back, his shoulders, his ankles, his knees, whatever spot you can point on the chart, he darn near has all of them. And starting to pile up. It wasn't so much of an issue in the first couple of seasons, but once starting in 2016, when he got that severe ankle injury, it really showcased itself. He had a massive setback in 2016, I believe, 2016-2017 season. He had only 2 sacks, down from 7 sacks or so, or he might have had a very low number of sacks. Was not very productive. Did not chase after the quarterback. Had forced 0 fumbles at all compared to what he was doing in his first couple of seasons. Now, of course, he had better production stats-wise, for this past season with 12 sacks. Had about 1 fumble forced or 1 fumble recovery. So, on paper, you would seem he was back on track. However, there is a thing called the naked eye. When you use the naked eye to apply to one situation, it opens things up in a broader sense. And what the broader sense was, Ziggy Ansah, once again, is dealing with injury issues. And it cut short his season, or a limited number of games for a second straight year, as it did in 2016. So now, if you were the Detroit Lions, and you see all this evidence, all this proof, all these occurrences, all this history in front of you of a player who is, while on the field, a tremendous talent and tremendous need and outstanding help to you and your team as a whole, it's kind of puts you in a bind of where it makes you hesitant, rather, I should say, of wanting to take such a huge risk or a huge gamble on not only signing him to a long-year deal, multi-year deal, but also the amount of money that you're likely going to have to pay him. We're talking at least, $60, $70, $65, $70 million contract with potentially 40 to 45 or 50 of a guarantee. That's a huge risk to take on someone who, again, has not played in a full season now going on 3 years here, and has no detailed sort of arrays of injury histories. So I understand the hesitation of the Lions part, but not want to pull that trigger yet. Also, they got to understand, though, where they are financially. They want to enter a situation where, they may want to keep Ziggy again next year, but are they really willing to pay him $20 million? Unless he has a massive break, massive season where he outperforms, stays relatively healthy for mostly, if not all of it, and has similar numbers to what he did in his first couple of seasons. And obviously, you want to take that chance of opening up the discussion of not just of that $20 million franchise tag, but also, hey, let's see how can we break this down into a 4 or 5 year deal for you so you can stay here for as long term. But also, the catch, the opposite side of that coin is, what if Ziggy is doing that knowing it was a contract year for him? And who's to say that once he gets his money, the production will sag off or stop due to, again, another injury rearing his head or complacement now that he's got his big payday. So it's a convoluted issue with many potential outcomes that, the Lions, they have tread very carefully because, again, they've been down this road before here with Suh. They got burned. Can they learn from their mistakes now to find themselves a better outcome in the Ziggy Ansah situation? And to me, it comes down to where if you want to keep him, you got to find some, you hope he has a great season, have a better come together in terms of negotiations and hammer something out. If you guys want to part ways, then you darn well better have a good replacement already set in mind or a good plan of sorts to go into effect.
Buck?
Yeah, those are all great points, and at risk of piggybacking and repeating what Ed said, I'm just going to say this. He's a 29-year-old guy, So in the NFL, 30 is seen as the bell curve as far as production and health, and everything else starts to go downhill. Obviously, with the advances in medicine and everything else that we've seen, guys can play for longer. But you have a player that his injury history doesn't seem to be completely healthy. And when you're asking for a long-term extension or a long-term deal, Ziggy Ansah is not dealing from a position of power. He's 29 years old. He's on the PUP list after a knee injury this spring, or a knee surgery this spring. And he hasn't fully recovered from that, or at least has not been able to demonstrate that he's a full 100% to go in training camp. So you have all of those factors that weigh in, and whether they need him or not is one thing. Yeah, they need a pass rusher, because pass rusher and cornerbacks in today's NFL are your premium positions. Not to say that other ones aren't as important, because you need good players everywhere, but you need to rush the passer, and you need to be able to defend the pass if you can't get home. So when you're talking about those two things, Ziggy Ansah fills a need, but to spend a lot of money on something that is definitely a need and to not get the return on investment that you're hoping for, that's where the Lions are at right now. I wouldn't sign him to a long-term extension if I was Bob Quinn, because he can't stay on the field now, or he's having trouble staying on the field. And throughout his career with the Detroit Lions, he hasn't proven, outside of 1 year, that he was able to stay relatively healthy, that he is worthy of such an extension. And so I'd be more apt to say we're going to franchise him this year. If he comes and blows everybody out of the water, they have the option to franchise him again, because they can do that. They can use that. And again, it'll be significantly higher than what he's getting paid this year, which is $17.1 million, I believe. And if I'm Bob Quinn, I'm not looking to hand that guy $70 million when he might not be able to fulfill the entire length of that contract. If he is there on the team for that long, it's going to be difficult to remove that from the cap. You're going to have dead money. And Bob Quinn, a Patriot disciple, is not in the business of paying guys to sit on the sidelines. So when you're looking at Ziggy Ansah, do the Detroit Lions need Ziggy Ansah to be good? Yes, they indeed need him to be very good. Can they count on him to do that? No, they can't, because to this point in his career, he has not been able to prove, outside of the 1 year where he showed that flash of greatness or that potential to be very good, he hasn't been able to stay on the field with any regularity. So to pay a 29, soon-to-be 30-year-old guy a huge extension, it's very risky. And that's not something that Bob Quinn and the way that he's been brought through the NFL system operates. You try to minimize risk as much as you can. Ziggy Ansah, in their opinion, is too much risk to shoulder that type of long-term extension. And so I don't think that they would give it to him. Now, again, if he comes out this year, rises above the injuries and recovers from that knee surgery and shows up to play and has a great year, it makes that question tougher for the Lions. But I don't think overall that it'll really make their decision one way or the other. I think their decision's already been made. The franchise tag basically gives them a year that they hope that Ziggy Ansah is really good. And then if he dries up the value, they can let some other team overpay him, because I don't see him being able to continue even a good pace this year when it comes to the numbers over the length of that contract. And so the NFL, those are the things that you have to do now. You can't look at what they're doing for you now. You have to be able to look at what they're going to do for you 2-3 years down the road, because in the salary cap league, if you make the wrong decision, it's going to haunt you for longer than that contract's actually on the books, because then you have to be able to mix and match and put guys in that spot. There's nothing really behind Ziggy Ansah that impresses me. They tried to shore that up a little bit in the free agency pool, and through the draft, but they really didn't go after anybody that was a big name. When you're talking about defensive ends, they were trying to do what they can with what they have in house. And for Ziggy Ansah to get an extension at this point, I mean, he didn't even make it to camp 100% healthy. And it's hard to count on him doing that throughout the rest of the season. The NFL is a nasty game. And a guy who continually keeps getting banged up, it's really hard to go to somebody that's going to sign you to a contract and say, well, I know I've been hurt these last couple of years, but I got everything figured out. Even though I'm getting towards 30 and my body's already betraying me to this point, I think I can get through that. And you can't pay a premium price for a guy who's not going to be there the entire time.
No.
And this is the kind of situation that's popping up now. The other guy like Le'Veon Bell for Pittsburgh is going through the same thing. He's a great running back. He produces great numbers. But at the same time, when I'm the Pittsburgh Steelers, I'm not going to hand him a bunch of money because, number one, he's already had a major knee injury. And as a running back, that is something that stays with you for the rest of your career. Regardless if you had successful surgery or not, it's something that's going to stay with you. And it makes you more susceptible to injury the next time around. And if Le'Veon Bell blows that knee again or has something else that happens to him, you're waving $70 million goodbye. And it's really tough for the teams to say, you know what, we'd really like to give you a bunch of money because we think you can do great things. When you look at it and say, are we going to pay this guy to play or are we going to pay this guy to sit the bench because he's hurt? So where I'm at on Ziggy Ansah is the Detroit Lions definitely 100% need him to perform as he is potentially capable of. But I just don't see it happening. And even if it were to happen this year, which is becoming less likely with his knee surgery recovery taking longer than they thought, it's hard to say that they should extend him to a long-term contract and hope that he makes it through that long-term contract and is able to produce at the same level. I mean, this is probably the number one argument. You have teams that say, I don't want to pay you for past performance because I can't guarantee that throughout the length of your contract. And you have players that are saying, we're killing ourselves out here, literally, to make money, to do everything that we can. And they feel that they deserve that amount of money. And so it's always the tug of war between the owners and the players. And this is something that's not going to change. Todd Gurley talks about guaranteed contracts and how everybody's contract should be guaranteed and this and that. As an owner, I mean, you can't guarantee guys money in a game that literally one play can end your career because insurance policies can pay that off, but it still stays on your cap room, and you can't get new players because of it. That makes it very difficult to move forward as a team. So I don't see this issue really going away for the Lions throughout the year, simply because this is going to be the first year under Matt Patricia that they struggle, especially in the pass rushing aspect, getting it home to the quarterback. People are going to say, well, we need Ziggy Ansah because he's the only guy that we have under contract that can do anything. Well, that might be true, but Bob Quinn is looking at it and saying, I don't know if I can trust him for the next 5 years. And it's a valid argument. Both sides have valid arguments, but who's to say which one is right? Because, I mean, there's just no right answer. Both sides have valid arguments, and I've talked about this with other people on other players. Like I said, Le'Veon Bell's one. It just becomes like a stalemate because you don't have teams that are willing to fork over a bunch of money for guys who are getting towards that age of 30. When you get to the age of 30, that's universally viewed in the NFL as the downturn time. And teams don't want to be paying premium dollars for guys that can't give them premium results. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with Ziggy Ansah, especially through the rest of camp and preseason, if he's able to get back on the field and play and show that he's gotten over this injury and has finally recovered, or if he can't get through it and the Lions decide to part ways.
Also, to add on real briefly to the topic at hand, and this is not to be taking any type of shot or whatever type of jab at Ziggy's talent. But who's to say that the reason why he had such a big reduction in those first couple of years is he had a guy like Ndamukong Suh next to him that could take all those double teams, leaving him with more one-on-one opportunities. Now, Suh is gone. And, of course, on top of the injuries, some of his production slowed as a result. So there's always that factor to consider, in my view.
Yeah, and that's 100% true because, I'm a Bears fan, and I remember, people talked about Brian Urlacher and how great he was. And he's a Hall of Fame guy, but he was at his best when he had Ted Washington and Keith Traylor in front of him, 300-pound plus guys that are basically taking up the entire middle of the offensive line. And Brian Urlacher could roam around unfettered and do what he did best. And as he aged and the Bears got worse, they didn't have the same dominance up front, and he started to decline. And those are things that went hand in hand. Yeah, he was getting older. Yeah, he wasn't as fast, but he also didn't have guys that could keep those blockers off of him and let him do his job. And the same thing goes for pretty much any NFL player. I mean, you look at guys like Ben Roethlisberger. Ben Roethlisberger has a pretty good career. But when he doesn't have a running game to keep the blockers off, he struggles. Because no matter what wide receivers he has, it is hard to complete passes when your face is in the dirt. And guys talk about how valuable they are and everything else to the teams. Well, there are other guys that are helping get there. And for guys that have had a couple of good years and then somebody else leaves the team and then their production declines, people start to think, well, he's past his prime, he can't do anything. Well, it may not be just him. It may be somebody else. And then Ndamukong Suh, when he's with the Lions, that year that Ziggy Ansah really kind of broke through and actually had a relatively healthy campaign, you're right. He wasn't facing two guys. He wasn't the focal point. And when you're not the focal point, your numbers are going to increase. I mean, look at Kerry Hyder. Kerry Hyder had a fantastic year a couple years ago. Why? Because nobody knew who he was, so they didn't pay much attention to him. As soon as he started making sacks and making offenses concentrate on him, his production declined. And it's the truly great players that, even though the schemes are against them and people are gunning for them, so to speak, they're still able to make plays. And I just don't see Ziggy Ansah as a guy that is a franchise cornerstone as a defensive end, where it doesn't matter who he has in front of him or who he has alongside of him, he's going to make plays.
Yeah, and if the Lions do sign him to an extension with a premium price, with a premium amount of money, for example, they would only hope, technically, that he stays healthy, which he probably won't.
Yeah, and not only that, not in addition to staying healthy, but also you're signing him to that type of contract with that type of money. You better hope he plays on a level of like, say, a Von Miller or an Aaron Donald or a Khalil Mack, a level of that guy, of any of those guys I just mentioned, to warrant and deserve that type of contract. And like you said, and again, like we just mentioned, you only showed any glimpse of that because what? He had a guy like Suh that could take the pressure off him. Suh's gone. And now he's come back to earth more a little bit of sorts. Now let's see what he's really made of this year. Is he more than what we're selling him out to be, or is it something else? It's yet to be seen.
Yep. Mm-hmm. So the Lions already in training camp, getting ready for the preseason, early August. That it's very near, guys. Well,
this week will be the Hall of Fame game, and we'll be off and running, and it'll be interesting to see. As camp always is for the NFL teams. Guys get cut at the end of camp. Guys get moved around. This is the time of year that you start to trim the fat. I mean, you can win free agency all you want. You can win the draft all you want, but it's got to show on the field, and we're finally getting to that point of this year.
Mm-hmm.
I'm just happy to see some football again. It's been a bit too long, you know. Granted, we had some basketball and some baseball and some hockey, but you know, there's just nothing quite like football. And so I'm glad at least an increment of that is starting to come back.
Football seasons are always short, even the NFL seasons. But let's move forward. Transitioning to hockey. Speaking of which. We heard from Winging It In Motown via Frank Vashner that Henrik Zetterberg said he's not sure he'll play next season. They contributed to asinine beat writers like from the Detroit Free Press, Helene St. James. They give her credit and praise her. Oh, like what in the world is that about? But here's the thing, though. We got to recall, like 2 or 3 weeks ago when Jeff Moss wrote that article, Henrik Zetterberg is going to the LTIR, which he should be too, and this upcoming season will be his last. Now, Winging It In Motown caught up on it and thought ahead of time that he may retire and simultaneously hope he'd play one more year. Well, he may retire, but how could you hope that he'd play one more year? Winging It In Motown is just a bunch of fanboys from SB Nation, and then they go on and say that they think his retirement could hurt the Red Wings organization.
You're stupid.
Well, his retirement would hurt because then you'd have the capture penalties. If he just straight up says, I'm done, that's different than going on the Chris Pronger or the Johan Franzen plan where you're on long-term injured reserve, which means that your salary doesn't count against the cap. Even though it still gets paid out, it's not going against the team's cap number, which means that you're free to sign other players underneath that number because you can't count that against the total aggregate salary cap because of the long-term injured reserve designation. So his retirement, his physical announcing of retirement would hurt the team. Him going on long-term injured reserve and just not being able to play, that wouldn't hurt the team at all, necessarily, when you're talking about the salary cap, because it would relieve them of a lot of cap space, even though his salary is much lower in the last 2 years of his contract. His cap number is still pretty hefty. But at the same time, when you're talking about how it hurts the Red Wings, yeah, they'll be without their captain, but you're not talking about a team that's built to play 10 this year. You're still in that process of rebuilding. So I understand that you want a veteran presence and you want to have guys that are part of that rebuild that can hopefully bring along the youngsters and give them some tips and kind of guide them through. But it's for that little bit of production that they get out of Zetterberg, who's got a bad back. He's playing as much as he can, but it's just going to be too much if he tries to keep playing and coming back and not being able to fulfill his duties as a captain because he's on the sidelines. This is something that has befallen other captains and other players in the NHL, and to know when it's time is really hard for a professional athlete to come to terms with that. And this seems like the setup, at least from what has come out this summer, the setup is that he's going to try to play. He's going to try to do everything in his power to get in the lineup. But if he can't produce or perform, even to the level that he's been able to the last couple of years, which has been on a pretty bad team, for him to go on the injured reserve and help out the team that way, boy, what a thing for a captain to do is gracefully bow out, use the vagaries of the salary cap to your advantage, and help the team by allowing them to sign other players that could potentially help now while you still collect the check. I think that would be pretty powerful. And for people to say that they'd be missing something, yeah, of course they'll be missing something. You're missing your captain. It's not something that needs to be taken lightly. It's not great to have your captain basically without actually saying I'm done. But at the same time, this is a business. This is something that needs to be attended to. And if he can't play, he can't play. and there's no reason for him to keep going out there and trying to play. I mean, I'll use the example of Steve Eisman when he had that devastating knee injury back in the 2002 playoffs and played through it. He still could produce, but then immediately had surgery after the season, was out for half the year the next year. And, yeah, it hurt the team because he wasn't playing on the ice, but at the same time, had he just tried to play through that and then continue on through the injury, eventually that would have caught up to him, and he would have been out regardless. So if I'm Henrik Zetterberg, long-term injury reserve is probably the best-case scenario for him because it gives him the option to come back if he somehow manages to get that back healed up or at least fit enough to be able to play at a good level. But you're talking, again, we just talked about this with Ziggy Ansah. You're talking about a guy who is even more advanced in age than Ziggy Ansah. The injury history is still there because he has had back problems in the past, and he's finally getting to the point where he may not be able to continue. The back just may not let him play, and the discussion is there in front of Allen, and maybe he just decides that he can't go. The doctors say that he can't play. The reports are that he is not medically cleared to play, which means that even if he wanted to, he'd have to get a doctor to sign off on it, and it doesn't sound like that's happening right now. So long-term injury reserve is probably the best bet for them, not only for Zetterberg, but for the team. And they have to move forward from there. I mean, they've done it before, and they'll be able to do it again. I mean, you can't play forever. And the Red Wings have proven that with guys in their organization that they've had captains like Steve Eisman and Nicholas Lidstrom who finally just had to hang up the hat and say, you know what, I'm done. I can't play anymore. And that's what's happening now with Zetterberg. And to say that he's more needed than those two guys at the time that they left is probably true because they're not at the same level that those teams were when Lidstrom retired and Eisman retired. But to say that they desperately need him is kind of silly because they are not a team that's built on contending right now. They are a team that's rebuilding. They are a team that needs to get guys experience. And Henrik Zetterberg shuffling along out there with a bad back isn't going to make any of those guys better.
Ed?
Yeah, I would say with this whole regard issue with Zetterberg, the best option would be to do the LTIR. It leaves that door open for future return if he wants to, but it gives him the option to say, hey, I've given everything I possibly can give throughout my whole entire career. Injuries, health, all of that, and I've been handsomely rewarded as a result. I want to enjoy the fruits of my labor. He has more than well earned that option to do so. And for those that want to be so despondent about, what will the Wings do without their captain? Are they going to rely to someone completely young to take the ship? Well, sometimes situations arise where, it kind of has to come to that. Let's not forget, when Eisman was named as a captain, like first name captain, okay, they were rebuilding then too. Okay, so people seem to forget that because we've had this sustained 2-3 decade experience of just cups and championships and president trophies and MVPs and Veznas and all the other sorts and accomplishments and Hall of Fame talent and great fortune along the way. I get that. But remember, there was a time when the Red Wings were the dead things. And just coming out of the ashes of that era was this young upstart kid from Canada named Steve Eisman, and he was 19 years old, and they decided to just name him the captain all of a sudden. And again, that was a process, and Stevie himself had to go through some hardships and hurdles along the way before he finally became and morphed and evolved into the champion, the legend, the Hall of Famer that he was and is. So it may require that same sort of process for one of these young upstarts, or, because now, granted, one of the alternates, so to speak, is just an applicator. So if he's named captain, I'll just throw up. So, but if there's someone like a Dylan Larkin per se, or Andre Zetterberg, assuming they don't trade either of those two, by the way, I could see one of those being one of those guys to say, hey, this is not a step where we want to be, but we're going to deal with it right now. and we'll be coming up rosy on the other side. We're going to lead you along the way. I would expect one of those guys to be that sort of captain where, hey, it's shown, it's proven, and you reward them with that as a result. It could be also one of these young draft picks that you just got as well. I mentioned this to Taylor about a couple episodes ago about that could be a possibility. But as for Zetterberg, it doesn't surprise me. I mean, if he's taking this long to, make a decision, so to speak, because training camp is getting ready end of August, early September? It's not that far away. So if he's not fully committed, in my view, by this point, then his mind has already been made up of what decision he's getting ready to make. It's just a matter of time of getting the right setup, the right setting and situation. It just could be a more where he does it in a conference call. Because, remember when Draper and Osgood, I think even Nick Lidstrom. Well, no, Lidstrom might have actual press conference, but the other guys I mentioned, when they retired, they did it through a conference call or a call into a radio station or that. It was just as formal as that. It would not surprise me if that's what they're trying to set it to. Either that or the actual press conference variety, where they have the podium and the microphone, and Zetterberg can actually have time to look into the camera, look into the faces, essentially, of Red Wing Nation and personally thank them for all the years, all the service, and all the cheers, and all the memories. They may be waiting to set up something like that. But that watch is ticking. It's getting close to nut cutting time. So a decision will have to be made, and publicly, if not made, but have to be publicly announced very shortly, because we got a lot of restless people getting antsy.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Right. And I think when you talk about, setting him up to bid his farewell, you can posture that with, I can't go right now. I'm hoping that I can recover. And you have to cover all the bases when you go with the LTIR designation, because you don't want to be seen as a team that's trying to circumvent the cap by letting a guy who's obviously retiring and not being able to play anymore. You have to be able to leave that door open. That's something they did with Johan Franzen when he got his concussions. They said, well, we're hoping he comes back, and we're hoping that he finally recovered from this. Well, it's 2018, and he still hasn't recovered from those symptoms. So you have to be able to set it up the right way. And if it indeed becomes a long-term injury reserve situation, that press conference is going to be more geared towards, I'm trying to get back. I just can't play right now. I just can't do it, and I'm cheating everybody by trying to play if I do. So that doesn't mean I'm retiring. That doesn't mean I'm going away. But right now, I just cannot continue. And it really just depends on how they set this up. But all signs have pointed to Zetterberg exhausting every opportunity and every available solution to be able to play before he's making this decision. And I think that's the way it's going. And if people are telling us that he's not medically cleared to play, that he's unable to uphold the standard that he and the team thinks he should be able to get to, then the injury designation should be applied, because it's not like he wants to walk away from the game. If he could play, he would. It just becomes a little bit sticky. The Marian Hossa situation people bring up with the Blackhawks, how he had that allergic reaction to hockey equipment and that skin condition where he literally couldn't play. It's not that he didn't want to play, it's that he literally couldn't. And that's where they have to really hammer home the fact that Zetterberg is not retiring because he just doesn't want to play anymore. He's literally physically unable to play, but he has the will, he has the ability as far as skill, but his body just will not let him do it.
Right, kind of reminds us of the Ziggy Ansah thing. Ziggy Ansah and Henrik Zetterberg are both physically unable to perform at the same time. Isn't that right, Ed?
Yeah, it's a great consistent thing.
Mm-hmm. Well, only one team left to talk about, and that is the train wreck that is our beloved Detroit Tigers.
That one is long gone.
They took 2 out of 3 from the Kansas City Royals because the Royals sucked. The White Sox have taken over them for fourth place in the AL Comedy Central, and then they return home to lose 2 of 3 to the AL Comedy Central leading Cleveland Indians, the last one being an 8-1 drubbing. Jordan Zimmermann lasting only 3 innings while giving up 5 earned runs on 6 hits. Daniel Stump, 1 earned run on 4 hits. Buck Farmer, 2 earned runs on 3 hits. Yeah, the pitching was horrible in general.
Atrocious.
Yeah.
Atrocious.
Yeah.
Chris Ilitch deserved that.
Yeah. Jordan Zimmermann, people have propped him up as maybe being able to have one last flash in the pan. Maybe the Tigers could convince somebody to take on some part of his contract and get something in return. Well, those hopes were dashed today.
How much money does he have left on that remaining on that deal?
He's got 3 years left at 18 per, I believe.
Wonderful.
Whoa.
Oh, lovely.
3 years is too long.
Yeah, because it was a 5-year deal when he was signed, and he's only this is the 3rd year of that contract.
Oh.
$54 million.
5 years, $110 million. And,
Oh, yeah. But yet Max Scherzer couldn't get his money.
Yeah, he's with the Washington Nationals now. Even Zimmerman is untradeable. He was injury prone the last 2 years, and he still can't stay consistent on the mound. Although he had a span of great pitching, he decided to come back down to earth here, suffering 3 straight losses.
The funny thing about Max Scherzer is, so he took the money and the obvious path, or at least for him, obvious path of being a better team, because Max Scherzer didn't want the $144 million that he was being offered, and decided to go for the much larger cash grab from the Nationals. But people kind of dismiss that because the Nationals are seen as a better contender to potentially win a championship. Well, Max Scherzer and the Nationals right now are struggling, and Bryce Harper, people are bandying about if he's going to get traded. So I think for both sides, they probably wish they could time warp back to that day where he was offered the $144 million, and it could have been a lot different for both teams had that not happened. But it is what it is, so they had to go out and get a starter. They went out and got Jordan Zimmermann from the Nationals after he was granted free agency, and he's been a total and absolute bust for the Tigers. So they were hoping they could at least do something with his contract, but much like Victor Martinez and much like a couple of other players the Tigers have had, that's not going to happen. He's stuck on the books. Anibal Sanchez was one. He's going to be stuck on there for a while, and that's just going to be a penalty that the Ilitch family gets to pay because they tried to lowball Scherzer a little bit. He didn't like it, and they had to go with the desperation signing of Jordan Zimmermann, and now they're getting their just desserts on that.
Oh yeah, it's called The Bill is here it is due, and the Bill is here for the Tigers.
Yep. Mm-hmm. And now nowadays they keep having to lose money, and they keep having to sell after this era of greatness, only to fail to win a World Series is now over, and the Tigers are going to keep selling.
By the way, pardon the interruption, it just dawned on me, and again, speaks with the theme of players being physically unable to perform. When we're just talking about big contracts and taking big risks and being hesitant, look at prime example, numero uno, up in Detroit, Miguel friggin' Cabrera. How much money are we paying that man a year again? And how many times do you keep getting injured, tears his biceps, injures his foot, injures this, injures that? Granted, some of it is not his fault. And also, granted, I sympathize to a degree of what his frustrations at fans thinking that he's somehow quitting or not being productive enough because he's choosing not to play through agonizing injury. But it's just another cautionary tale example of, okay, you want to give him all this money now, be prepared for the deal, for whatever comes as a result.
That's the hat trick, folks. Ansah, Zetterberg, and Miguel Cabrera. all physically unable to perform at the same time.
Yeah, I would think that. Yeah, I would say the difference with Cabrera is that he played through a lot of injuries because he had some pride and he wanted to compete. And the torn biceps, obviously, that's not something that was his fault necessarily. I mean, he didn't go out there and try to do some crazy thing where he's diving into a tarp or something. I mean, he hurt it on a swing. That's just age. And Father Time is undefeated. And that's all I'll say about these guys who are physically unable to perform. Is regardless of their relative young age, when you talk about life expectancy, well, in professional sports, Father Time is undefeated, and he will continue to be, regardless of what money you throw at somebody. There is just no way that you can guarantee, unless you're somebody like Tom Brady, who is going to make it to his 41st birthday here with pretty relative clean bill of health, except for the 1 year where his knee got blown out. You're talking about guys that it just isn't going to happen. You have contracts that are being written, and you know that they can't fulfill those. You're paying them for not only past performance, but also future performance, and that's where the rub lies between owners and players. If I'm an owner, I don't want to pay Miguel Cabrera $25 million when he's 41 years old because he may not be able to stand up, much less play. But at the same time, if you don't do that, he's going to go have productive years for somebody else, and you're going to get excoriated. On the flip side, you have players that are wanting these contracts, knowing full well that at some point, sooner rather than later, injuries are going to be a part of that equation. And
they're part of sports.
Cabrera, he had not had major injury until after he signed that big contract. And so people looked at that and said, well, he's been a pretty healthy player. He hasn't been sidelined much due to injury. It's a safe bet. Well, it is at the time you signed him. But when you sign him for that long and you sign him to that much money, you're basically forfeiting some of those years because he can't possibly continue that trend. Like I said,
and he's the
Father Time's undefeated.
Yeah, this is a first baseman. This isn't like a pitcher, like, say, Verlander getting the massive contract he got. He only got to play once every 5 days. Whereas first baseman / DH, you're playing darn near every single day. So that attrition is going to catch up to your body one way or another. Also, bonus reference, I know we traded for him, but I think he counts too. Blake Griffin.
Oh, well, Blake Griffin is not. Well, Blake Griffin's not injured, though.
This year. Not yet.
Yeah, but you just have the dreading sense that it may be.
Leave that to Dwayne Casey to make him better, along with the rest of the Pistons players. I can't wait for that.
Yeah, well, and Blake Griffin, like you said, he's had big injuries before, and the massive contract that the Clippers handed out to him. The NBA is a little bit different ball game when you're talking about the contracts and the salary cap, is because you can pawn those off on other teams a little bit easier because those guys can play 10, 15 minutes at night and give you something. Whereas when you're talking about MLB players or NHL players, more frequently you're seeing guys that have career-ending injuries, and those are harder to come back from. Basketball is a smaller roster, and so you're talking about guys that can be a little bit more easily replaced because even though Blake Griffin is going to take up a large part of your salary cap, if he goes down with injury, the drop-off, you've only got 15 guys. When you're talking about MLB or NHL players or even NFL players, those rosters are bigger. And so for NBA players, it's much more of a calculated long game because there's not a lot of guys standing behind him ready to take the place of an injured player. So you don't see nearly as many of those contracts go through because the NBA has kind of baked that in. But you have all these other sports that, you have players trying to get these ridiculous contracts when they know that at the end of that contract, they very well may not be able to play the level that they are now. And it is just, it's mind-boggling to me that there are teams still doing this every year, handing out contracts to guys that they can't possibly fulfill.
Right. So, the Tigers home against the Cincinnati Reds Tuesday and Wednesday. The Reds are not what we thought earlier. They're 48 and 58, while the Tigers are 45 and 62. That tells you the Reds have a slightly better record than the Tigers have now. The Reds may still be fourth worst in the National League, but it's better. But the National League's records are better than the American League's records. The way I saw the wild card standings, and it's pretty telling that the Tigers are sinking in not only in the standings in the American League, but in the standings of Major League Baseball at its entirety. And then they go out west to the Oakland Athletics and the Los Angeles Angels. They're going to get crushed there too. But the Cincinnati Reds Detroit Tigers series could go either way. But it's only a 2-game series, so it's not. So even if the Tigers win at least one, maybe both, it won't last long.
Yeah, I think back to the earlier 2-game series when the Tigers played the Reds at Great American Ballpark. The Reds stunk. They're a little bit better now. They still aren't that great, but they stunk back then.
And the Reds swept the Tigers.
The Tigers had a chance, if they were to win those 2 games, to be at 500. And that was the nadir, or the low water mark, I guess, or the high water mark, I should say, for the Tigers, because after that, the bottoms completely fell out. Ever since they lost to the Reds, it's been a slow and steady decline. They're now 17 games under 500, whereas the Reds, who I don't remember the record at the time of that series, but they've steadily improved their record to get to 10 games under 500. So it just goes to show you that, it's a really long season, number one. And number two, not to get excited about things when you don't need to. Because everybody was excited the Tigers could get to 500. They're playing a bad team. And they're going to head into that series. I think it was that weekend where they were going to play Cleveland. And they were going to be 1 game back and all these other things. After that crap show that they had in Cincinnati, I'm glad it's gone downhill.
Yeah, those fans are slappies if they think the Tigers are going to reach 500. Get the heck out of here with that. They're 17 games below 500. That's not even close.
When you reach enough of a desperate level, I said before, when you reach a certain level of desperation of wanting to see any measured type of success, you will accept any and all types of mediocrity that comes with it.
Yeah. Yeah, that's at best right there. That's the point Ed's trying to get across to those fans out there that don't realize that. So the Tigers are near the trade deadline, which is Tuesday, July 31st at 4 p.m. Eastern Time, and the Tigers haven't done jack diddly squat. Now, the reason for that, though, as I'm already detecting, cutting to the chase, is General Manager Al Avila may do further homework while shopping to sell. Now, we already know who's on the market.
There's not a lot on the shelf that the Tigers have in soccer. Mike Fiers is probably the only bona fide trade prospect that they could hope to get any sort of decent return for. Francisco Liriano has been steadily downhill since his return. He missed a start because of an allergic reaction to something.
Let Buck talk.
And, there's not much to be had. I think after Mike Fiers, the Nicholas Castellanos trade rumors kind of died off, and I don't think that we'll be seeing that here in the next couple of days. This is going to be a pretty sotto voce effort by the Tigers. This trade deadline.
You mentioned Fulmer, right, Buck? You mentioned Michael Fulmer.
No, I haven't, because I don't
Michael,
think that he's on the table either. I just don't think that, with the way he's performed this season, I don't think teams are really chomping at the bit to give up the farm for him, and especially when the Tigers themselves don't know what they have with him. He had one great year. He's fallen off since then, and yeah, the potential is there. But again, you're talking about injuries. You're talking about significantly reduced performance. He's a great prospect, but at the time right now that they're looking at him, the Tigers can command a lot for him, and I don't think there's teams willing to pay what the Tigers are going to want for a pitcher with potential that Michael Fulmer has.
Yeah, and Fulmer's still on the DL. That's the cherry on top of the sundae. That confirms that he's untradeable. So he's stuck with the Tigers until the off season. That's the facts. So we have now come to we have now covered all the teams, but just when I thought we weren't going to do any segments, I've actually come up with some questions for Ed's favorite segment. 5 questions. Are you guys ready?
Go ahead.
Music to my ears.
It's time for 5 questions on the Michigan Sports Truth.
Question number 1. Could Matt Patricia's sexual assault case have been true if not dropped? Buck, we'll start with you.
There is always a chance. I'm going first.
Well, yeah, I mean, I was going to say the same thing pretty much. I mean, yeah, there's obviously a chance, but we'll never know what will happen. We've already kind of talked about this before when we did that segment, but he isn't going to tell us anything new, and nobody else is going to tell us anything new. So to answer the question directly, of course it could be true. Whether we find out that answer or not is significantly less visible right now.
Yeah, there's always an open chance. It just comes down to when will be that big break or that big moment that watershed of, okay, this was the definitive turning point of either proving his guilt or proving his innocence or something else entirely different.
Yep, and you guys just answered question number 2.
Next question.
Will this whole case ever turn around? Like you guys pointed out, there's always a chance, but the question now is when, which there will never be an answer until it pops up. So, moving forward.
Next question.
Question number 3. Do the Lions no longer need Ziggy Ansah? On the field, yes, but his injuries and his finances, probably not as much, to say the least.
Yeah, I kind of alluded to this a little bit when we talked about him. Do they need him? Yeah, they need him because they don't have any pass rushers behind him that can really do a whole lot for you. But the risk there when it talks about injuries and paying him, that might be a price that is too high for the Detroit Lions and a lot of other teams to bear. So did the Lions need a dominant pass rusher? Well, hell, everybody does. But at the cost that's going to come to them, I don't know if they're willing to really extend themselves out and make that leap. And it doesn't seem like they are right now. Obviously, they use the franchise tag to find out if that's something that would be the case. But, do they need him on the roster? Well, it's going to be determined by what he's able to do in his performance this year.
Ed?
I say in terms of a short term, they need him for this year, but in terms of a long term, I could see it be a scenario where he's not brought back and he just walks. And the reason why I say that is because there is a guy out there that I kind of had my eye on who I think could be available for next season unless he's franchised again. I believe his name is Marcus Lawrence.
Well, that's going to be our next question, the answer to our next question.
Next question.
All right. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
Yep. Question number 4. If they don't need him, who could be their best replacement? Ed, we'll start with you this time.
Easy. My pick is, granted, it will be some backwards type of thinking, but I think you should really try and get DeMarcus Lawrence from the Cowboys. He could be either restricted or unrestricted free agent himself next year, and unless he's franchised again or whatever the case, he would be be a free agent of sorts. So I would say if he's available, I would say try taking a shot at him, especially knowing full well you're not going to be bringing back Ansah.
Buck?
Yeah, I mean, you look at the defensive end market, and if everybody needs one, well, that means that the price is going to go up. And when you're talking about guys that are going to be available, the market's not going to be exactly bursting at the seams with guys that are going to be highly sought after by teams. I mean, you look at the list, you have Ziggy Ansah up there, DeMarcus Lawrence is another, Cameron Wake at Miami. He's getting on in age. Brandon Graham's really the only other guy that is notable. I don't think Khalil Mack will make it free agency, and if he does, I don't think he'll be in the Lions' price range. So you're talking about a lot of guys. Aaron Donald's another one, but he'll be restricted free agent, so the rules with him are going to be a little bit different, and I don't think the Lions are going to want to give up any compensation to sign any restricted free agents, so you have to really look at the unrestricted side. There's just not a ton of guys out there that are shaking the pole and telling me, hey, they need to go out and sign this guy. They might be able to go for a lower cost option and find a little bit of a diamond in the rough. There's a lot of guys that could fit that bill, but it really remains to be seen exactly who's going to be able to jump up and do that, because when you're talking about the high-profile free agents, I don't think the Lions are going to look to spend that much money on a defensive end. I think they're going to go bargain hunting, find a guy who maybe didn't get as much usage with his former team, but when he was used, has some pretty good stats and some pretty good metrics, and also fits in the scheme that Matt Patricia has. That's the other thing that people have to consider is, Khalil Mack might be great in Oakland because of the system they run. He comes to another team, and they do things a little bit differently. Maybe his impact is mitigated by that system. So it's something that bears watching, obviously, because the Ziggy Ansah right now, the spotlight's on him. But if they decide to walk away from him at the end of this year, there's not a ton of guys out there right now that are going to be popping up as what you would call premium free agents. I just don't think the Detroit Lions and Bob Quinn are looking to spend $1 gazillion on the defensive end. Is that going to be the missing piece of the puzzle? I don't think so. I think they can go bargain hunting, because the Patriot way is to go find guys that are lower salary, higher value. And I think that's the way that they'll go if they let Ziggy Ansah walk at the end of the season. I think they'll just look for guys that can produce, and maybe they go with a platoon, or maybe they go with somebody that's not as well known, but they scout them heavily and think that they can integrate them into that system and make them a better player.
Mm-hmm.
Next question.
Finally, question number 5. Will Henrik Zetterberg's retirement hurt the Red Wings organization? At least financially, yes, but on the ice, I don't know. Physically, it could hurt. Physically, he could be hurt himself, but to the Red Wings organization in terms of the roster, depending how good or bad they are, they might not need him, because let's face it, the Red Wings need fresher and younger players. Henrik Zetterberg's already aging. He's already almost 40 years old, and his back's not going to get any better. And the Red Wings need healthier players, especially the young ones. So financially, yes, but on the ice, no, performance-wise.
Yeah, I'm focusing more on the ice issue, but I agree with you, Taylor. I don't think this would hurt the Wings at all, because, like I said, this is a rebuild. So whoever you're going to put that C on, they were going to be the captain of a much mangled ship at the moment. Yeah, just not just an applicator, hopefully.
Yeah, when you talk about Henrik Zetterberg hurting or helping the Red Wings, you're going to lose some points, because even though he was significantly decreased as far as production from when he was one of the foremost two-way players in the game, that was 10 years ago. And yeah, he's giving you 50 points a season. That's something that is not easy to replace, but at the same time, Henrik Zetterberg has shown us what he can do. We all know what he was able to do. And I don't need to see that anymore because he's not going to be here when they're contending for another Stanley Cup. And that's the real question that you have to ask yourself is this player going to be here when we're contending? And when you're talking about rebuilding teams like the Detroit Red Wings and the Detroit Pistons and the Detroit Tigers, all three of those teams really kind of going through some transitional times and making roster decisions, you have to look at it in that microscope. Are they going to be here when we have a chance to hoist a trophy? Henrik Zetterberg is not going to be in Detroit when they have a chance to contend for a Stanley Cup. It's just not going to be happening. I don't care how long his contract runs till. They're not going to be a Stanley Cup contender until after his contract's done. They might be in the playoffs. They might be going on their way up, but they certainly will not be a championship level team. So I think that his departure, even though it will, in the short term, bring down their production because you have to find those points from some other guys, I would rather see them put younger players in there and see what they can do. I don't think that it's going to hurt them necessarily in the locker room because even though he is the captain, this is not a team that is flush with a lot of what I would say veteran talent. They have veterans, but they're not a lot of talented guys in there. And so, going with a younger group and finding a captain that is going to be your guy when you get better, like they did with Steve Yzerman back in the day, you have to let those guys learn. You cannot just force somebody into a position that is earned by somebody else, and then all of a sudden, oh, well, now you're the captain because we're good. That's not how it goes. And, I could definitely see a scenario where Zetterberg goes on LTIR. They give Nicholas Cronwall the C for this year because he's going to try to struggle through another year. And he'll probably get the C for this year, and then he'll be gone. And that will be the transition between Zetterberg and whoever else the long-term captain for the Detroit Red Wings is going to be. So him leaving isn't going to hurt them in the long term because he's not going to be here when they're potentially looking at being a contender. And so that's the microscope I look at all of those types of transactions under is if I get rid of this player or if this player leaves, and I can prevent that from happening, will they be here when we're contending? And for Henrik Zetterberg, that answer is a resounding no. So, no, I don't think it'll hurt the Red Wings at all if he's not on the opening day roster for them.
All right. Another factor to consider is Ken Holland still being the general manager as far as the rest of the roster is concerned. Ken Holland still does not want to contend with younger players. Which is the point. Ken Holland wants to keep spending and spending and spending on veteran guys in free agency over the summer, but when he's forced to sell near the trade deadline, and when the Red Wings are not nearly intending to be contenders for a Stanley Cup playoff spot, then he probably may or may not be a good seller.
Well, I mean, it's pretty obvious that Ken Holland has grasped some straws this offseason and will probably continue to do so because that is his nature. That said, when you're looking at the trade deadline, you got a lot of guys, veteran-wise, that aren't going to get you a lot in return. There's still people thinking that Andreas Athanasiou is going to be traded, which is very possible. He's got a contract now that is pretty reasonable, term and of money. And so I don't think that it would be out of the question for him to be shopped around the deadline. But it's really going to be dependent on what they're able to do this season. If they somehow have to put a lot of young players in the lineup, then maybe they're looking for shorter-term solutions, where they're not trading for guys that are 2 or 3 years away, or trading for draft picks that are going to be unknowns when they finally get up to them. They might be looking for guys that maybe or at least NHL ready. If they're trading guys like Athanasiu, so it's really going to be interesting to watch what they do this season, because if they struggle like they have the last couple of years, you're going to take one step forward in drafting guys like Zadina and Bueno way under slot where they were projected to go, but yet you're not using them, and so you're going to take two steps backward by trading guys and trying to fill spots in to get those guys bridged out to the NHL roster, trying to fill those spots and make it so that you're quote-unquote competitive until those guys are ready. That's the Red Wings way. Over-ripen their prospects, and when they're ready, by the time they get up to the NHL, they've only got so much left in the tank, and then they have to either get rid of them or they just lose them because they can't keep them on the roster through waivers. So until the season plays out, it'll be difficult to tell which way they go, but I could see another year where they don't do well, but they don't make a lot of moves at the deadline that are going to help them in the long run.
Ed, anything to add? Ed? Ed? Hey Ed, are you still up? Yeah. Oh, okay. Do you have anything to add? No? Okay. So, Ed, I think it's slept apart. Ed, wake up!
Yeah, we're still considering something here.
Yep, mm-hmm. All right. Well, yep, all right. So that wraps up our 5 question segment. So to our entire audience, if they want to answer those 5 questions, just replay that segment portion of this episode and answer them the best you can without going out of line. Gentlemen, thanks very much for getting together with me. Hopefully we'll do at least hopefully we'll do this next week on episode 327.
Yeah, I'm looking quite forward to it. It was quite fun. Can't wait to do it again.
Man.
Good job, Taylor. Good job to you, Buck.
Yeah, 90 minutes of full analysis. Yeah, that feels great. So before we sign off, we want to remind everyone to share this episode and our entire podcast on social media. Have their friends share that as well, because we want to tell them that the Michigan Sports Truth podcast is searching for a wider online audience that is fans of sports. So please spread the word about the Michigan Sports Truth podcast on Spreaker, SoundCloud, iHeartRadio, Apple Podcasts via iTunes, and Spotify. Its Facebook page, the Michigan Sports Truth podcast, and its Twitter handle and Periscope channel at Michigan_Truth. For Buck Geno and Ed Smith, I'm Taylor Phillips. Follow me on Twitter at DT2Phillips, Buck Geno at Buck Geno the third, 3 eyes for Roman numerals, and Ed Smith at Ed Smith 313. We'll talk to you next week on episode 327. Thanks very much for listening, downloading, and sharing. Stay smart, everyone. TTFN, ta-ta for now.
The Michigan Sports Truth podcast does not represent or defame any of the teams it covers. It only detects, exposes, and reveals honest, actual, and hidden truth, facts, and statistics about them.
And mission complete.